Good morning and welcome to our Ask the Agronomist Facebook Live today. We are here with Phil and we're going to be talking about something pretty exciting, variable rate soybeans.
Yep, I didn't want to leave soybeans out. You know, we had corn. I thought, well, I don't want to make soybeans feel bad, so got to get those in there.
Well, good deal. And today we're going to be covering, first of all, how variable, is your field. Secondly, the growth habit, and then how to vary populations, which will be pretty exciting.
Yeah.
Okay,
yep.
Sounds good.
Jump
Let's
right
get started.
in. Sure. So as we jump in and talk about variable rate soybeans, people are probably like, why are they even talking about variable rate soybeans? But there are actually a lot of guys that do it successfully for primarily a lot of times seed savings. But also the other thing that a lot of guys aim for is canopy closure. So one of the most important things with soybeans is getting that canopy closure by, really you try to get it by flowering or reproductive stage, but usually it's more around here at least, the early part of July. But the reason you want to do that is to keep down that evaporation from the soil, the transpiration, everything that's happening. So if you can close those rows, you shade out weeds, and you decrease the amount of loss of water. So, and this is one of my fields on our farm, and I always bring this one up because it's a great example, because we have really sandy, hilly spots in here. Maybe somewhat hard to see, but you can see those really light spots.
Yep.
You know, and that's really what you want to, where you want to vary the rate in terms of soybeans. So you got really dark spots here. Actually, there's a okaboji up the top there, some really dark stuff. So a big change in variation. With corn, I like to say at least a 10% jump in yield. So we've got, in these spots here, we've got anywhere from 15 bushel the acre up to 60 here. So a matter of about 25 feet of elevation change and about 25 foot of distance there. It's not a huge field, it's only about 35 acres, but a lot of change in yield and productivity in this field. So a really great opportunity to try variable rate soybeans. So if guys are considering variable rate soybeans, remember, start with your most variable field and then put a check in there too. I always encourage guys to do that. So
okay, sounds good.
I guess I threw a map of it in here. It just gives you a little better, you know, this is a yield analysis, a gridded yield analysis, and you can see, I told you, those areas that are up in the 55 to 60 versus those hilltops, which are down 15 to 20.
Yeah.
So,
all right.
Good variation in that field.
Sounds good. And I know you touched a little bit on this, but maybe why we would even consider doing soybeans.
I get a little excited about soybeans. That's what I did my master's degree in. So, you know, when it comes to soybeans, one of the words I always use is compensation or compensate. Soybeans compensate extremely well. So before we did this morning, I looked up the definition of compensate, and I thought, man, they should have soybeans right next to that. But compensate means to make up for by exerting an opposite force. So if you think about it, that's like, okay, but they make up a lot of ground by exerting an opposite force. So I'll give you an example. So if you have defoliation, a lot of times we get hail, even in Iowa, throughout our territories. If you get around R1 or start of reproduction, and you lose 100% of the leaves, and I've done this as a grad student, defoliated plants just to test this, but if you defoliate 100%, take all the leaves off, you've only lost about 10% of the yield. So that just tells you right there, they're not setting pods. Once they're setting pods, it's a lot bigger deal. But even at R1, start of reproduction, if they lose all their leaf structures, the only thing they have to use for photosynthesis is a stem, and you know, basically it's a stem. There's not even pods there, but they can grow those back. It's like why guys hit soybeans with cobra or something. They try to split the stem and make it branch more. So they have a really good opposite reaction to negative effects. You know, and we learned that a little bit last year with some dicamba issues too. So they have an amazing ability to compensate. The next two things, you can jump down to the next one there. I
have a very serious selfie to share with us today.
I'm not the best at selfies, as you can see. You're making fun of me now. I'm sometimes camera shy, but this despite my sour look on my face, this is actually a pretty good example of some of our early 2 Liberty beans. And I was standing in a field that was in 15-inch rows, and this brings up another really good point with variable rate soybeans. One of those very important things is row spacing that you need to consider when you're up, you know, pushing those populations up and down. But this field gives you a great example of canopy structure. You know, these soybeans had competition on row spacing and within rows, so they grew really tall. You know, I'm not 6'5" or nothing, but these were up to my chest, so they were easily 4 foot tall in a lot of places. You know, so in those dark spots or those lower spots in your field, you can get really tall soybeans. So that's a great example of the canopy structure and how it can compensate. You know, if you're in 30-inch rows, they're going to branch more naturally.
Right.
I also wanted to throw in there, you know, our seed guide also has some really good information. You know, when you look at the bottom of those pages, you can see those things like the height, the canopy structure, you know, is it a bushy plant? Those kind of things are what you want to consider when you're looking at variable rate soybeans. So.
All right, sounds good. And then next, our last slide, just how to vary population. So I thought this was interesting.
Yeah, I had to throw that in there because everybody thinks about corn. So, you know, corn, you're usually pushing populations, you know, and on the sandy spots, you're pulling them back so they don't fight for moisture. Well, it's kind of the opposite in soybeans. You want to push the populations higher in those sandy, droughty spots. And the reason is, one of the first reasons I gave at the beginning was you want that canopy closure. Right. So what do soybeans do when you crowd them? Just what I showed you. They want to compete. They want to be the first one, like a tree in a forest competes to get that canopy. They want to be the first one above the canopy. So soybeans are the same way. They're going to push higher. They're going to put longer inner nodes in between each node. You won't necessarily have more nodes. Some people think that, oh, they're taller, there's more nodes. They'll just have a longer inner node. They'll push up faster and compete for that. So you want to push those populations higher on those sandy, droughty spots, and then a little lower if it's really heavy, dark. You know, most guys know that. Otherwise, you're going to get 6-foot tall beans, and they're going to fall over. Right. So there's a happy medium there that you need to consider. I just pointed out in our product guide, you know, looking at some of those characteristics for each variety that you're looking at, whether it's a tall plant, whether it's a bushy plant, you know, what kind of characteristics does it have is important for determining a population, how to vary it. These two things, tillage and crop rotation, have to throw those in there because they should be a consideration no matter what. So to me, when I look at that, what I really think of is disease potential, especially in our area and throughout our territory. You don't want to force the populations high because the other thing that does, it helps canopy close faster, but it also helps, or also doesn't allow as much wind through the canopy. So the less wind you have, the more disease potential there is, you know, not air mixing things up, so more chance for white mold and things like that to develop. So don't push populations on a field that has prior disease history like white mold or something like that. So pay attention to those things. And then lastly, I talked about productivity kind of at the beginning when I was going through our field, you know, and I said on corn, you know, don't go 500 seeds per acre. Well, on soybeans, obviously, you want to push a little more than that. You know, I would say, and unfortunately, it's going to be a general rule because this is really farm to farm dependent. So, you know, at least moving at 10,000 seeds per acre. You know, if not 20, depending on your spacing. You know, guys that do 20-inch rows or 15-inch rows, maybe you want to push it a little more. You know, vary them from, say, 130, 140 on up to 180 or something, depending on how big what your dry spots look like and so forth, or maybe even back it off. I'm not saying you can't back it off under 140. You know, I like to see you need that 105, 110 final plant stand. And soybeans will a lot of times get there no matter what you plant. If you plant 220, it might only be 140, you know, by the time the season's in. But, you know, taking into account those things, you know, we'll talk more about, you know, seed treatments and stuff too, but all those things come into the consideration. But I would say, you know, make sure you varied it enough to see a change, you know, and then put a check strip in there, you know, because if you put a check strip in there, you can get out there before the combine rolls, hopefully a couple times in the season, and look at that, take some pictures, look at the canopy structure, see how it's changing, and then make your decision whether it's worth it after the combine rolls and you see the final yield map. But just some good general guidelines, I'd say, you know, don't be afraid, going back to the word compensate, don't be afraid to push the populations up or down to try this out, because typically what we go by in terms of replacing a stand at the beginning of the season is around under that 70, 80,000, but I've seen plant stands in soybeans of 60,000, if they're somewhat even, still achieve 70 bushels. So, and that was in Indiana, but I mean, it can happen anywhere. It's just a matter of, and that was a good point, I brought that in there, about your planter. You know, we talk a lot about planter accuracy and stuff. So having an accurate planter, it's a different story if you're putting 220,000 out there with a drill. That's about as good as maybe throwing it out by hand versus using a planter that's much more accurate and seed spacing and so forth. So those kind of things should be your consideration too. If you're planting with a really nice 15-inch planter, then you got good accuracy. So you can maybe start at 120, 130 and move up to 170 or something on the hills. So yeah, just some general guidelines for guys.
All right, sounds good. Well, anything else to add? That wrapped up our 3 points we had.
No, yeah, I think we covered it pretty well. I don't want to get too excited about talking about soybeans, but I'd be happy to talk to anybody that has questions too. So.
Yeah, feel free to call in anytime. Phil is great to talk with and work with, and he'll help you out. Thanks for tuning in, and have a good day.